Every person in this country is a private property owner in one way or another, be it the car you drive to work or the house that you live in or the right down to the clothes on your back. And like I said earlier, that is our constitutional right as Americans to have exclusivity of our private property.
Hi everyone, Rebecca Terrell with the New American Magazine, and my guest today is Mark Lapka, a farmer in South Dakota who's battling to defend his property rights against a private company that wants to come in and install a pipeline through his land. This isn't a pipeline to funnel vital oil or natural gas to our energy-depleted economy. It's a pipeline to transmit hazardous liquid carbon dioxide from industrial locations to underground storage, all in the name of supposedly saving Mother Earth. Mr. Lapka is here to tell us about the plight of the landowners in the path of these plans and why this impacts all Americans. Mark, I know you're busy in the middle of harvest, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this crucial issue today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't we start this conversation by you explaining what's going on in your area? How did you first hear about the pipeline, and what was your initial reaction when you found out this private company expected to have full rights to use of your farmland?
It was about a year ago in late August of 2021 when we received our initial information from the company. At that time, I really had the assumption that it was an oil or a gas line. I didn't even realize the existence of CO2 pipelines at that time. So, I went into it with an open mind, thinking that, I'm not anti-pipeline. We need oil and gas. We use that every day. And but as they held their initial meeting in I think it was October 27th of 2021. Well, by that time, I had done a little bit of my own research and kind of gathered what exactly we were looking at here. And then when we went into that meeting, one of the other gentlemen that I've gotten to know real well through this process was there, and he asked the company if they were planning on using eminent domain. They wouldn't answer the question. And as he pressed them a little farther, they wouldn't commit to not using it. Well, it was at that point that, I kind of turned against this because you want to rile up landowners, bring up eminent domain. Private property rights are very important, afforded to us in the Constitution, because our founding fathers knew what it was like to live under the thumb of tyranny. They couldn't own private property. And so, that's a big reason why a lot of our forefathers come over here in the first place, was to escape that tyranny and be able to have private property rights. That's something that's very important to us. And now, as that process has continued to go on a little bit longer, the company has always sworn to only use 100% voluntary easements. Well, with the whole agenda that's driving all of this, because what is CO2 at the end of the day? It's plant food. Why do we want to sequester that? Our plants utilize that. The Mother Nature and God, developed that a long time ago to work very well. And so, the whole agenda of decarbonization is being driven by the Green New Deal. And why should we have to, as landowners, be at risk of having our land confiscated, only in turn for the federal government to provide tax credits as the source of income for these projects? So that presents two problems to me. We're here sitting out here having to be at risk of our land being confiscated, only in turn to pay for it as taxpayers. We're getting stung both ways.
Absolutely. Now, these companies that are putting these pipelines in, are you in the path of Summit or Navigator?
Summit.
Okay,
Summit
so
Carbon
Summit
Solutions.
Summit has the largest pipeline planned. Theirs is a 2,100-mile Midwest Carbon Express, which I think is a ridiculous name. It sounds like some type of a train. But it's their upper management is teeming with political connections, and they're going through Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, South Dakota, and that ends in North Dakota underground storage in North
Correct.
Dakota. Navigator is another is another company. They put these promotional pictures on their websites that make it look like they're doing little more than tile plowing the property. They're just putting this conduit in that's going to be covered back up. And then why can't you use your farmland for farming after that? Is that an accurate description, or what actually happens to that land when the pipeline's installed?
Well, what they're proposing is a 50-foot permanent easement and another 50-foot temporary easement. They will strip the topsoil off of that entire 100-foot, put the topsoil to one side, then they come in with the excavators and they dig the trench. The subsoil will then be placed on the opposite side of the trench. Now, the problem with that lies within, we have pretty fragile soils where we are, and we are not blessed with feet of black dirt. We're blessed with inches of black dirt. It's not very deep. When you disturb the soil like that, you affect the productivity not only for the few years, you're talking a lifetime in our area before you can get that back to producing. Also in our area, we're lucky and fortunate enough to still have a large amount of native grassland. We have a large part of our county that is not suitable for arable farming, but, for raising cattle and livestock on. And once you destroy that native vegetation, you never get it back. You'll lose that forever. That's another large concern there. And it's not just the damage to the productivity of the land itself, it's also in the use for ourselves going forward. In that easement, you're not allowed to construct anything on top of that easement. You're not allowed to plant any trees on top of that easement. It really handcuffs your ability to do what you want to with your own private property.
My goodness. And now let's talk about safety issues too, because we know the little town in Mississippi in 2020, the entire town had to be evacuated when there was a burst in a pipeline there. Because carbon dioxide, this is the liquefied form, which there's great hypocrisy in that, by the way, because it's so energy intensive to put carbon dioxide into its liquid form and then transmit it through those pipelines that way. But when there's a rupture, the carbon dioxide is heavier than air, and it can kill people and livestock, and I assume it can kill vegetation too. Do you know?
Well, yeah, you're right there, because one of the problems that I have with this here, the old saying is the solution to pollution is dilution. Well, here, this is a process that they're doing the exact opposite of that. They're taking carbon dioxide as a gas, as a relatively inert material. Well, in order to make it easily and more efficient to transport, they run it through giant compressors and compress the gas into a liquid. Now it becomes a hazardous material. And in the event of a rupture, what can happen is when the pressure is released, that liquid will basically convert back to a gas and expand on a volume at 535,000 times to 1. So now you're talking about a big gas cloud. Now that gas cloud for a time being is still heavier than air. It will fall to the ground, follow low-lying areas, and move around with the wind. The concern with the safety is in that, and I know Summit has said that they have plume modeling that shows what could happen in the event of the rupture. However, they have been very cautious, or I should say they won't share that information with us. So one just has to assume that it's not good, because in the event of an oil leak from an oil pipeline, we know how to clean that up. It's relatively easy. It's going to affect a small area and it can be taken care of. Here, you're looking at something that gas cloud can move for miles. You're looking at an impact area far greater than what an oil pipeline could produce.
And I know that the Iowa Department of Justice in one of your neighboring states has asked for that documentation from Summit, and they've still refused to give it and the overall assessment of the, let me see, what was it, the risk assessment, as well as the emergency response plan. So they're refusing that. So you say South Dakota has had no luck in getting that information either.
I know our PUC has stated that it's a requirement of theirs to see that, but they haven't, forced them to share it at the same time either. So it's still something that remains to be seen.
Let's go back and talk what you brought up before, the agenda that they have to, supposedly reduce mankind's carbon footprint and save Mother Earth. What's the consensus among farmers up there about this supposed man-made global warming? And do you find that there's a lot of awareness about the United Nations plans, the Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, and how this all fits in with that?
I'm not going to go out and say that there's a lot of awareness of those particular agendas. People that pay attention to it are highly aware of it. As far as the decarbonization agenda, there's not a lot of belief out that out in the country out here. We live in a pretty a wonderful place. And, beings that we're farmers, we know how plants work. We all went to elementary school and learned that plants, trees, corn, grass, they all use carbon dioxide, remove the atom of carbon, release the oxygen back out into the atmosphere. And we need that oxygen. We need plants to do that. If you remove carbon dioxide, there's going to be less of that happening. Another concern that we have out here, you know what the CO2 level they say currently in the atmosphere is? About 420 parts per million. In greenhouses, they boost the level of CO2 to upwards of 1,600 parts per million that allows more photosynthesis to happen, creating more production out of the plants. Well, one of the concerns is if we deplete our atmosphere with carbon dioxide, will we realize lower yields on our farming operations?
Right. And is that part of the agenda too? Look, I wanted to make a point too here. People might be watching this and going, "Oh, well, we'll pray for the farmers and hope they win." But this is very pertinent to every American, is it not? Because if your private property rights are desecrated, then what's to keep them from showing up at my doorstep tomorrow and doing the same thing to my private property? What can the average American do to help the farmers in their plight here with these pipelines?
You're very true there because, this is a private property issue first and foremost for us here. Every person in this country is a private property owner in one way or another, be it the car you drive to work or the house that you live in or right down to the clothes on your back. And like I said earlier, that is our constitutional right as Americans to have exclusivity of our private property, to do what we want with it. And I think people really need to pay attention to this one because I don't like the direction that the country's going in this aspect. If at the end of the day, they're so easily able to alienate your private property rights, which one's next?
Exactly. Do you have a public comment period? Is your state or county holding hearings about any of this?
Well, the PUC will be having a hearing coming up. Right now they're on pause. They haven't set a date for it. And in order to participate in that, you have to be given what they call party status. You have to be a party to it. So they close out the general public, and that sign up period has come and gone. The more pressing matters are, there's another angle, I guess, that we haven't touched on. In 2016, the state of South Dakota passed a law in our state legislature that allowed any company with an active application from the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission to survey private property without consent or permission. And none of us knew anything about that before this. And so I'm part of a large group of landowners throughout the state, and we have elected to challenge the constitutionality of that law because we've always held the belief in the state of South Dakota you can keep who you want off of your property and allow who you want onto your property. And so our belief is that that law is constitutional. Well, there are hearings that haven't been scheduled yet coming up for that lawsuit to be heard because we feel that our private property rights are jeopardized when they can force their way on. It's already a form of eminent domain. In fact, that survey law is part of our eminent domain laws. So as far as them saying that they're never going to use eminent domain, they already are using it.
They're already doing it. They've put it through the back door.
Yeah.
Mark, we so appreciate the information that you've given us, and especially this, like I said, this busy harvest time. So I know you need to get back out there. Let's keep in touch, and we will be praying for you in the meantime. Godspeed.